The quickest way to improve your communication is to change the scoreboard in your mind. Most of us walk into conversations thinking in terms of winning or losing. That's the first mistake, because when the goal is to win, every word you choose is built for defense or attack. And when that's your mindset, you stop listening, you stop connecting, and you start performing. Communication becomes a battle instead of a bridge. And here's the truth: when you're battling, even if you think you win, you lose connection. Think about the last time you argued with someone and won. Maybe you had the sharper comeback, maybe you proved your point, maybe they even went silent. Did it feel like you actually connected? Or did it feel like you just proved you were louder, quicker, maybe even harsher? Winning the moment usually means losing the relationship, because no one walks away from a conversation thinking, I love how they destroyed me. They walk away feeling unseen, dismissed, and defensive. Shifting the goal means redefining success in communication. Success isn't proving you're right, it's making sure you're clear. Success isn't shutting the other person down, it's opening them up. Success isn't hearing silence at the end of your words, it's hearing understanding. And when you carry that mindset into every conversation, you instantly change the energy. You're no longer trying to overpower someone, you're trying to reach them. That's a whole different kind of power, and it doesn't come from winning, it comes from clarity. When you make the shift, the pressure disappears. You don't have to keep score. You don't have to stay on guard waiting for the next jab. You don't have to rehearse your counterpunch. Instead, you can actually listen. And when you listen with the goal of understanding, not winning, your responses slow down, your tone softens, your words sharpen. People feel that difference instantly. They sense that you're not here to crush them, you're here to connect with them. And in return, they open the door to connection much wider. Winning is short-term satisfaction. Understanding is long-term strength. When you argue to win, you might silence someone for a moment, but the resentment lingers long after. When you argue to be understood, you create space for honesty, for calm, for actual problem solving. That's not weakness, it's wisdom. Because clarity doesn't just change one conversation, it changes how people see you in every conversation that follows. They stop bracing for conflict and start trusting your intent. Here's the shift in practice. Instead of asking, how do I prove my point? Ask, how do I make my point clear? Instead of thinking, how do I beat this argument? Think, how do I understand their perspective? Those little questions reroute your brain. They pull you out of combat mode and into connection mode. And when you're in connection mode, people lower their defenses. The conversation isn't about two sides clashing, it's about two people reaching. That's when communication works. So much of communication falls apart because we assume that clarity is automatic. It's not. You have to choose it, and clarity only shows up when the goal is connection, not conquest. You don't have to sacrifice your point. You don't have to roll over. You don't have to agree with everything said. You just have to shift what you're aiming for, not the win, but the understanding, not the trophy, but the truth. And the second you do that, your words get lighter, your presence gets calmer, and your communication gets instantly better. Most people think they're listening, but they're not. What they're actually doing is waiting for a gap, waiting for a mistake, waiting for their turn to jump in. That isn't listening, that's reloading. When the goal is to win, you treat every word from the other person like ammunition you have to dodge or fire back at. But when you listen to learn, the entire purpose of your attention changes. You're not gathering ammo, you're gathering understanding. And that's the kind of listening that transforms communication instantly. Listening to learn requires curiosity. Curiosity says, I want to know where you're coming from, instead of, I want to crush where you're coming from. Curiosity creates space for connection because it invites the other person to expand, not shut down. When people feel that you're genuinely interested in their perspective, they start to trust you. And trust is the foundation for any real communication. Without curiosity, conversations are just battles for airspace, but with it, they become opportunities for clarity. Or think about the energy of a comeback versus the energy of a question. A comeback is sharp, fast, often defensive. It's designed to win the moment, not understand the person. A question, though, slows everything down. It puts the spotlight on the other person, and it shows you're actually trying to get it right, not just get it over with. Questions like, "What do you mean by that?" Or, "Can you explain that a little more?" Don't weaken your position. They strengthen your presence. They say you're not afraid to hear more because your goal is clarity. When you listen to respond, your mind races ahead of the other person's words. You're crafting your defense, rehearsing your rebuttal, shaping your speech. By the time they're done talking, you've stopped paying attention halfway through. And here's the danger. People can feel that. They know when you've checked out of listening. They know when your silence isn't about absorbing, it's about planning your next strike. And when they feel unheard, they stop communicating honestly. They give shorter answers, more guarded words, less emotional honesty. On the other hand, listening to learn communicates something powerful without you saying a word. It communicates patience. It communicates respect. It communicates that you value the other person's perspective enough to set your ego aside for a moment. That doesn't mean you agree, and it doesn't mean you're surrendering. It means you're strong enough not to make everything about your comeback. People respect that, and respect is the soil where better communication grows. Here's the shift in practice. Instead of thinking, "What am I going to say next?" try thinking, "What are they really trying to say right now?" That single mental switch keeps you present. It keeps you tuned into the actual words instead of the imaginary battle in your head. And the surprising thing is, when you truly understand someone's point, your response becomes sharper, calmer, and more effective anyway. You don't have to reach for comebacks. They come naturally because you're speaking to the heart of the issue, not just the surface. Listening to learn is also about discipline. It's choosing not to interrupt. It's holding back from the urge to correct every detail. It's resisting the temptation to win the silence by filling it with your words. Discipline in listening looks like stillness, like patience, like presence. And that discipline pays off because the other person feels it. They feel safe enough to actually express what they mean instead of hiding behind defense. And when they do, you've created a conversation where real connection is possible. Is one of the most common mistakes in communication is confusing validation with agreement. People think that if they validate what someone else is feeling, they're giving up ground, they're admitting defeat, they're letting go of their own position. That's not true. Validation doesn't mean you agree. It means you recognize. It's the difference between saying, "You're right," and saying, "I hear that this matters to you." One is surrender, the other is respect. And respect is what keeps conversations from breaking apart. Validation is oxygen in a tense conversation. Without it, the interaction suffocates. People raise their voices, they repeat themselves, they get stuck in a loop because they don't feel heard. But when you validate, you cut that loop instantly. You say, "I see your frustration," or "I get that this is important to you." And suddenly the emotional temperature drops. You haven't given up your point, but you've given the other person space to breathe. And that space is where real communication begins. Think about it like this. Emotions don't need agreement. They need acknowledgement. If someone says they're angry, you don't have to argue whether they should feel that way. You can simply acknowledge, "I hear that you're angry." That acknowledgement doesn't fix everything, but it changes everything because people aren't always looking for a solution first. They're looking for recognition. The moment they feel recognized, they stop fighting for attention and start moving toward understanding. Many conversations break down because both sides are so focused on being heard that they forget to hear. You can't move forward if both people are shouting at the same time. Validation acts like a pause button. It tells the other person, "I'm not here to erase your feelings, I'm here to hear them." And here's the paradox. The more someone feels heard, the more open they become to hearing you. So validation isn't weakness, it's strategy. It paves the way for your words to land without resistance. There's a simple formula that works in almost every tough conversation. Feelings first, facts second. If you jump straight to facts, you come off as cold, dismissive, even combative. But if you acknowledge the feelings first, the facts land softer. For example, instead of saying, "That's not what happened," You can say, I get that this situation felt unfair to you. Then you share your perspective. Same message, completely different impact. One builds walls, the other opens doors. Validation also requires humility. It's the humility to admit that someone else's feelings are real to them, even if they don't make sense to you. You might not understand why they're upset, but you can still respect that they are upset. That humility shows maturity. It shows that you're not threatened by someone else's emotions, and you're not so fragile that acknowledging their perspective feels like losing yours. That balance is what makes communication strong. In practice, validation sounds simple but feels unnatural at first. We're wired to defend ourselves, to correct misunderstandings, to push back when something feels inaccurate. But when you train yourself to validate before you argue, you flip the script. You take tension out of the room instead of adding to it. You keep the focus on connection instead of competition. And over time, this habit shifts the entire way people experience you. They stop seeing you as someone who needs to win, and they start seeing you as someone who knows how to listen, respond, and respect without surrendering. The quickest way to ruin a conversation is to treat it like a game. We keep an invisible scoreboard in our heads. Who spoke longer? Who interrupted more? Who made the stronger point? Who got the last word? That scoreboard makes us hyper-aware of winning moments instead of meaningful ones. And when you measure every word in terms of points, you turn the entire exchange into a competition. The truth is, conversations aren't games. There are no referees, no trophies, no final score that decides who was right. When you carry a scoreboard mindset, you walk into conversations looking for an edge. Every time you think you win a moment, you add to your tally. But here's the problem. You're the only one keeping track. The other person isn't awarding you points. They're building walls. While you're celebrating in your head, they're shutting down in theirs. What feels like a win to you feels like a loss to them. And in communication, the moment someone feels like they're losing, the connection is already gone. The scoreboard is also exhausting. It keeps you tense, on guard, ready to defend every word. You can't relax into the conversation because you're too busy calculating the score. And the irony is, even when you win on the scoreboard, you walk away unsatisfied because the relationship feels colder, the understanding feels weaker, and the energy feels heavier. Winning the scoreboard doesn't fill you, it drains you. Connection fills you, and you can't connect when you're busy keeping score. When you remove the scoreboard, you free yourself from that constant calculation. You don't need to count who interrupted more. You don't need to remember who had the stronger comeback. You don't need to fight for the last word. Instead, you can stay present. You can actually hear what's being said without running mental math in the background. And when you're present, your words carry more weight, not less. Presence communicates more powerfully than points ever could. Without the scoreboard, conversations stop being battles and start being bridges. You stop aiming to crush the other person and start aiming to connect with them. You stop worrying about how many points you've earned and start caring about how much clarity you've created. And the beautiful part is, when people feel that difference, they lean in instead of leaning away. They realize the conversation isn't about competition, it's about connection. That realization shifts the entire energy of the exchange. Removing the scoreboard doesn't mean letting go of your perspective. It means letting go of the need to win at all costs. It means trusting that your point can stand on its own without needing to be scored like a victory. It means recognizing that the strength of your words comes from their clarity, not their ability to shut someone else down. And that shift in mindset makes you a communicator people want to engage with, not defend themselves against. The scoreboard only exists in your mind. The other person isn't awarding points. They're looking for connection. They're looking for acknowledgement, for understanding, for some sign that their words matter. When you put down the scoreboard, you give them that sign. You show that you're not here to compete, you're here to communicate. And when people feel that from you, they let their guard down. They stop keeping their own hidden scoreboard, and suddenly the conversation turns from combat to connection. Clarity is the most underrated skill in communication. When emotions run high, most people reach for sharper words, louder tones, and defensive reactions. They think power comes from volume, speed, or clever comebacks. But the real power comes from clarity. Clarity cuts through noise. It lowers defenses. It removes confusion. When your words are clear, the other person doesn't have to guess, twist, or decode what you mean. They can hear you, understand you, and respond in a way that actually moves the conversation forward. Victory, on the other hand, usually creates fog. When your goal is to win, you pile on more words, more arguments, more heat. The conversation turns into a blur of back and forth, and by the end, no one is really sure what was said. They just know how they felt, attacked, dismissed, or overwhelmed. You might think you won, but you lost the one thing that matters most in communication: understanding. Clarity always outlasts victory because people remember how clear you were long after they forget how loud you were. Clear words come from a calm mindset. When you're defensive, you rush. You cut people off, you over-explain, you repeat yourself. But when you're calm, you can slow down. You can choose your words carefully. You can make sure your tone matches your intent. Calmness creates space for clarity. It tells the other person, I don't need to fight you. I just want to be understood. And that message is far more effective than any attempt to dominate the conversation. Clarity also protects you from being misunderstood. In heated moments, vague statements get twisted, exaggerated, or used against you later. But clear statements leave no room for confusion. Instead of saying, you always do this, you can say, when this happens, I feel frustrated. One is accusatory, the other is specific. One sparks defensiveness, the other invites discussion. Clarity doesn't just communicate better, it keeps the conversation safer for both sides. The best part about choosing clarity over victory is that it works instantly. You don't need to rehearse a speech, memorize lines, or prepare comebacks. All you have to do is slow down and simplify. Simple, clear sentences hit harder than long, complicated arguments. I want to understand you. That bothered me. Let's take a pause. These short, clear statements are easy to hear and impossible to miss. And when clarity is present, understanding follows quickly. Clarity requires humility because it strips away the armor of performance. You're not trying to impress with cleverness or crush with force. You're trying to connect with honesty. That humility makes your communication real.